And this was a good one because it's another basic fallacy, right? We're going to see that a lot of these, not only are they not good arguments, a lot of them are fallacies. Now, you'll notice that we heard this specific fallacy in the Bonson-Tabash debate that Father Deacon Dr. Ananias and I covered, where when Bonson is debating with Tabash, Tabash responds with all these arguments about how difficult the doctrine is and how mean the doctrine is and how he doesn't find it convincing. We've also heard this in Matt Dillahunty. Right? Orthodox Shahada just put up a great clip. I'll share that for you. Right? It's a funny it's like 7 minutes. And you'll notice Matt Dillahunty does the exact same thing. Right? So Matt Dillahunty being very slow on the logic uptake, can't make basic logical distinctions between what's an autobiographical feature and what's a feature of knowledge or rationality. If you remember when Bonson's debating Tabash, he says, I'm trying to think of how Tabash worded the argument. He said, why am I to respect a God who gave me reasoning and at the same time expects my reasoning to accept the irrational, illogical, and complex doctrine of the Trinity? And if I do not believe in 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, then I am damned to hell because I don't believe in an irrational doctrine. I find this hard to accept and to believe. Now, that was a bunch of like emotive, emotional appeals on the one hand, but also the fact that you think something is too complex or too hard, guess what? That has nothing to do with whether it's true or false. That's a fallacy. That's an autobiographical detail that is completely irrelevant to the case at hand. And likewise, when Trent is debating Matt Dillahunty, and Matt replies with all these autobiographical details of what he does and doesn't find convincing, it's completely irrelevant. It has nothing to do with what's in question. Nobody cares. It has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of what's being debated as to what you find convincing or not. As Father Deacon always says, that's a you problem. How does that have anything to do with the debate itself and the objective question of truth or falsehood? Has nothing, literally, nobody cares what you find convincing or unconvincing. That's an autobiographical detail. In other words, it's the equivalent of saying, I don't like it. And in the Tabash debate, that's what, I don't like the doctor. So what? We're not here to debate what you like. This is not the Food Network where we're asking you to sample, foods and tell us whether you like it or not. It's amazing, actually, how many so-called public intellectuals are able to pass off basic fallacies. It's astounding, really. I mean, it's not even like people say, well, you must have spent a lot of time studying the fallacy. No, actually, I haven't. I mean, logical fallacies most of the time, right? 99% of the time, unless you're debating a logic professor or a professor of epistemology, dude, 99% of the time, people are just going to throw out the basic ones, right? They're going to do this. They're going to do an emotional appeal. They're going to do the appeal to age, right? Remember Tabash did this where he says, I am much more confident listening to modern day scholars and scientists than dusty old books. So he's thrown in this sort of rhetoric of the dusty old books. So in other words, something being old somehow means that it's not true or less true. Something being old, something being new, has nothing to do with whether it's true or false. It's completely irrelevant. It might be an interesting anecdotal detail. That detail might be worth bringing up to bolster your case or to bolster some other argument. But again, it has nothing to do with whether it's true or false. I mean, and shouldn't this be obvious? There's old things, ancient things that everybody knows are true. There's ancient things that are also false. So the age, it has nothing to do with whether it's true. So again, remember, people always sneaking in these little fallacies. And they'll sneak them in when it comes to the Trinity. Hence, the Trinity is too complex, has nothing to do with whether it's true or false. And by the way, the people who say this don't apply this anywhere else. 99.9% of us don't understand the ins and outs of how an iPhone works. This is a complex piece of machinery. I don't understand how this machinery works. Oh, well then I guess I'm not logically bound to accept the iPhone because I don't understand it. It's too complex. I don't believe in iPhones. They don't exist. Cars now, right, include microchips, include internet access. The cars are computers now. Do I understand how? No, I don't understand how that works. Okay, well, I guess I don't buy that there are cars. I don't accept those. Do you see how absurd and stupid this objection is? It's it's like it's just autobiographical details. Okay, well, we're glad that you have a hard time with those issues, but I'm sorry, bro, it has nothing to do with whether iPhones exist or how they work. It literally has nothing to do with it. So autobiographical details are not going to be relevant to debates or to the topic at hand. But watch for those because people will try. They love to sneak those in. And by the way, people will say, "Well, why does God expect me to get this PhD in the doctrine of the Trinity to be saved?" Nobody has expected you to get a PhD to be saved. Salvation is not contingent upon that. But what is required is humility, right? Humility is required, and humility requires us to, when we come to Christianity, when we're new to the church, when we're new to these doctrines, to not think we have it figured out. And the chief problem, the ruin of all heretics, is not a lack of knowledge or a lack of facts. It's prelest. It's pride. That's the problem. And I know because I've done the same thing. I've made all of these same mistakes. I've been in prelest. I've been in pride. I thought I knew what I was talking about. I read so many books. I read this, that. And I was wrong. So there's a acceptance of the possibility of being wrong, acceptance of teachability, where we say, I'm going to consider the possibility that I'm wrong. Now, that doesn't mean you have to fall into some sort of servile, slavish attitude of like, I can never know what's true. I guess I'll just have to do whatever my guru tells me. And if he says that, it doesn't work like that. No, I mean, the purpose of the theology is so that you can know the theology. But it's also something that's difficult. And there's just no way around it. Yes, the theology is a difficult thing. Not everybody's called to learn theology. Somebody was complaining the other day. They said, Jay doesn't talk about spiritual stuff. He just talks about philosophy and this difficult stuff. It's not my job to talk about spiritual stuff. I'm not your spiritual father. I'm not a priest. That's not what I am here to do. That's another reason why we're not a cult. When you come in our Discord, we direct you to clerics. We direct you to the church. We tell you to go to a Russian Orthodox church. We tell you to go to a Serbian Orthodox church. We tell you to go to the best church in your area. And I don't tell you what to do in your spiritual life because that's not my job. It's not my role. I'm not a guru. All I'm here to do is to point you to the literature and to point you to the good arguments and to point you to the church. Orthodoxy can only go so far. Now, if you don't live near a church, then that's the best you can do. You do what you can. You do the best you can. But if your whole ethos is orthodoxy, it's going to be very difficult and it's not going to work. It's going to lead to ruin. And this is what we see with so many of these people that try to have Christianity and approach Christianity without the church. You can't do it. You'll short circuit, you'll fall into some dumb heresy, and you'll get puffed up, as Paul says. Beware, when you're new to Christianity, you're puffed up. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to think you got it all figured out. You're going to go try to tell everybody, and you're going to say a bunch of heretical nonsense. And I'm telling you from experience, I made all these mistakes. And yes, I even had problems with the Trinity. I thought, I don't get it. It's difficult. But then I needed patience, right? So a lot of times God tests us with patience. Are we going to trust his providence? Are you going to trust and wait for God to bring the right thing along, the right book, the right teacher, the right saint, the right meeting, the right providential thing? Remember the life of Abraham. God tests Abraham, not because God doesn't know, but to demonstrate to Abraham and to those around him that Abraham had a real living faith. And so we're all going to be like Abraham. We're all going to be put through tests. We're going to have to wait and see. And I can say from my own experience, when there was times where I thought, how do I reconcile this doctrine of the Trinity with this problem? What about this verse? This is a hard verse. I don't understand this verse in relation to the other verses. And guess what? Maybe 6 months later, maybe a year, I find the book providentially comes my way that answers it, that solves it. Oh, here it is over here in St. Cyril. Oh, here it is over here in Meyendorf. Here's the answer to that problem. Oh, here over in St. Theodore is the answer to that problem. Oh, here's St. Gregory Palamas, covering this issue in depth in this chapter. I'd never read this before. There's no shortcut, right, to that kind of an issue. The safe route, however, is to be in the bosom of the church, because the church is like Noah's Ark, and to trust the church. Yes, even with her faulty ministers, even with her corrupt leaders at times. Be patient, right? Wait on the Lord. Those issues resolve themselves. Again, telling you from my own mistakes and my own rash, right? So when I started reading Orthodox theology, 2007, I'd read a lot of Latin church fathers. I'd read a lot of Aquinas. I'd read a lot of secondary works on both. I'd read a lot of the Roman Catholic apologists, the mainline guys, all the Scott Hahns and all that stuff, Stephen Ray and all those guys. And I thought I had it all figured out. Like, I've got all this figured out. I know what I'm talking about. I've read City of God. I've read Augustine against the Donatists. I've read against the Pelagians. I've read that whole volume in Augustine up there on his theology. I've read tons of Jerome's works. I've read the Apostolic. I thought I had it all figured out. I had not read the Cappadocians. I had not read at length. Right? I had not read the later Eastern Fathers at length. And so I decided I'm going to have to dive into these Eastern Fathers. And so I started with St. Cyril. And I read a lot of St. Cyril. And then I read all the catechetical lectures of St. Cyril of Jerusalem, the other St. Cyril. And I started realizing, man, there's a lot I didn't know. In fact, I didn't even know how much I didn't know. And then I realized that the rebukes that Perry had sent me in emails, that he was right. That he was telling me back in 2007, you don't even know how much you don't know yet. So you're going to make a mistake if you rashly run into these topics and you haven't been sufficiently grounded in them. And he was correct. I was wrong. Perry was right. I went headlong into all these topics. Oh, I know what I'm talking about. And the more that I read, I eventually got frustrated, got burnt out, right? I'm done reading theology. So I took a break from reading any theology or any of this stuff for, 2 or 3 years, 4 years maybe. I don't remember. 5 years. And then I kind of gradually, I don't even remember how, somehow I just decided one day, oh yeah, there was that old essay about St. Maximus. I want to read that. So I gradually started, getting back into reading St. Maximus. And the only reason I'm telling you all this personal story is that I can give you my own eyewitness testimony that I've made the mistake of even back when you're an evangelical, right? You jump into, oh, you got it all figured out. And then you realize, oh, wait, I don't know anything about church history. I don't know where the Bible came from, right? And then you question that. And then you move back and say, oh, well, maybe the historic Protestant confessions are better than my local evangelical church. And then you move into, historic Protestant. And then you realize, well, wait a minute. Man, I thought I knew everything about church history once I was reading Luther and Calvin and John Knox and Zwingli and all these guys. I didn't actually know much about the church fathers. And you dive into that, right? And you think, oh, I got it all figured out now because I've read all these Western Latin church fathers. And I've gotten really deep into Aquinas. I know what's going on now. And what I'm trying to tell you is that, and I don't guess there's any way to really replace it without just lived experience, is that you don't know how much you don't know. As you get older, you learn more and more and more about what you don't know. And there's something paradoxical about this too, that doesn't mean that as you learn, you're like becoming more and more relativistic. Like the more that you learn, the more you've read, the more you've experienced things that, because I'm learning how much I don't know, I'm getting worse and worse off. No, paradoxically, it's the other way around, that the more that you learn how much you don't know, the more that prepares you to be a vessel to learn more, believe it or not. And when it comes to scholastic theology, I don't mean scholasticism, by the way, just academic scholastic theology, which many of our greatest saints have been preeminent scholastics. Not Latin medieval scholasticism, different thing. But St. John of Damascus, St. Maximus, Cappadocians, St. Cyril, St. Photius. St. Photius was the most learned man of his day. St. Photius the Great. He was a professor. He's a great academic, the most learned man in Byzantium. He's one of the pillars of orthodoxy. So it's just completely false, number one. And we've never said this. We always made this clear that when we're critiquing scholasticism, we're talking about the philosophical presuppositions and methodology of Latin scholasticism, not being academic. St. Gregory Palamas was an academic. He knew Aristotelian logic. He uses Aristotelian logic in his Filioque treatise, the one that's against it. Apodictic treatise, that's logic. So anyway, all of that just to say that the Trinity as too complex is an autobiographical claim and has nothing to do with whether it's true or false.
Divinity raises the humanity in Christ through theosis, and that's exactly what we experience.